Today I'll review two Blitz games that I played on Leechess. In both these games, I was playing against a player rated 2502 Blitz. And yeah, in this first game, I was with the black pieces and I just played in a very solid way. After h6, bishop h4, you obviously have quite a few different options that you can choose between. I was probably going to just play b6 in the game and keep a bit more tension in the position, but he decided to play the move of bishop f6. And one mistake that you'll often notice low-rated players make is that they'll often be looking to release the tension as quickly as possible. And I think that's maybe why he played the move at CD5 that does just kind of give me an improved version of exchange QGD. Whereas a move like Rook C1 would definitely be a lot more flexible by comparison. So after Bishop D3, all this is pretty standard with C6. H3 is a little bit weird compared to castles, but of course it doesn't massively change the nature of the position. And at this point, yeah, I'm just going to make it a little bit harder for white to get in the standard b4, b5 minority attack. Actually, after a3, I was also considering the idea of playing knight a6 and putting the knight on here just to hold back the move b4, but I ultimately concluded that the move b4 is actually not so scary here. And you might be wondering, well, what do we do about this b5 and the idea of just creating weaknesses in our structure? And the answer is we can even just play a move like b5 and just bring the knight towards c4, which is in fact an idea that we will see a little bit later in this game, where my opponent decided to build up a little bit with the move queen c2. Now, there's a little bit of an interesting question of how to organize the pieces, because I think that a move like knight b6 or knight f8 would certainly be a reasonable one to activate our bishop and improve the piece placement. But I went for a little bit of a prophylactic choice in the move of bishop e7, which is reducing white's capacity to play the move b4 effectively. And also, if you think about the bishop was kind of stuck against a brick wall, so it does make sense to improve the bishop's placement. After rook ab1, actually, I kind of wish I had played the move of bishop d6 here, because I think this is a more active square than the move of bishop f8 that I played in the game, which is just a tiny bit passive in comparison. Um, and I kind of realized as soon as I played it, but yeah, after the move of b4, we again face this question of, how should we deal with the idea of b5 in such a position? I think there's not really a right or wrong answer. There's really a lot of ways you can play it. But once again, I find that when you sort of keep the tension in a position, this gives you a bit more scope to outplay the opponent. And that's kind of the reason why, rather than taking and then playing b5 and clamping down on the queen side in this way, I decided to just play the move b5 and just keep this in reserve so my opponent would have to kind of sit and figure out a few more things. Also, after knight d2, knight d2 is a bit of a mistake, by the way. You probably should maybe consider a move like knight a2 just to try to put some pressure on the pawn. But he played knight d2, and after knight b6, we kind of see a little bit of an advantage of not having played a b4, is that we are hitting the pawn on c3. And now after queen c3, I think there are a lot of good moves that black can play. Like, there's not the sort of game that really fits for, let's say, setting a kind of puzzle position out of it. Just gets a very strategic middle game where kind of a lot of moves will be of fairly similar strength. And I think the move bishop d7, just defending the pawn, is just a very practical move for Blitz to ensure that by protecting her, you're not going to allow any unlikely tactical blows. And indeed, my opponent was not really able to handle the tension. Admittedly, something like taking a knight maybe would not be ideal just because of the fact that we would get a protected pass pawn and a pretty easy target in both the b pawn and even the potential perhaps to start the attack on the king side. But knight b3 is just a blunder though because of knight a3, and he's just going to lose the house here. After knight a5 takes, I did admittedly miss a little bit of a tactic here, where if I had seen the move bishop b4 and just grabbed the pawn, of course the game would have ended a little bit more quickly. Unfortunately, because I'm an exchange up, even a slightly inferior move like queen f6, just to take the pawn is not going to spoil the win either. And yeah, a bit later on, he kind of blunted a little bit. Note, by the way, that he's not actually threatening to take the pawn, because I do have the win of the knight with this pin. But after queen d3, g6, yeah, he just blundered. I mean, it's maybe incorrect to say blunder, because the position is clearly very bad for white regardless. But after knight c6, yeah, I was just able to just win the exchange, such I'm up two exchanges for a pawn, and this is why white resigned here. So you can kind of see it in order to beat players like 2-500, you don't really need to do anything super special. It's just about kind of playing solidly, kind of using familiar strategic ideas in the middle game and kind of letting them do some of the work for you. Now let's move on to the second game I played. This one I was playing with the white pieces. And my opponent played, again, a fairly mainline system where he went for the Knight off Sicilian. And actually online I've been playing the move Bishop E2 quite a lot lately, where I find that there are a lot of very interesting ideas with Bishop E2, like where, for example, move like H4 and going F4 is an idea that our generic IC has had some success with recently. Or if E6 again, you kind of have the option to go for this pawn storm with moves like G4 or F4, then G4, G5, which actually do set black some objective problems here. But in the game, I went Bishop D3, just going for a little bit of a shortcut. Again, if E6, we still have the idea of playing it quite aggressively. We can think about G4, G5 at some different moments to take over the initiative. So instead, my opponent, rather than playing this or a dragon approach with G6, decided just to play it in the true Knight of Spirit with E5. But now we kind of get to see an advantage of playing Bishop D3 over, say, a move like Bishop E3, for example, because here, like, Knight E2 doesn't make as much sense when you're blocking in the bishop, but which is why you usually see a knight go to one of these two squares. But when you're not blocking the bishop and you just have a very easy plan of playing on the king side, then this kind of makes sense, and white does actually, I think, have some reasonable chances to fight for an advantage in such a position. After bishop e6, yeah, you could argue that probably f4 immediately is a little bit more precise, but I didn't really see any disadvantage to starting with castles and keeping the opponent guessing just for one more move. Because we're going to play the move f4 anyway, just very thematic, and saying that if they take, we can take with a knight and just put the pressure on the bishop, which is kind of showing why you probably would prefer to play bishop e7 and maybe keep white guessing a little bit as to which sub you're kind of going to go for here. Then probably you are going to play bishop e6 and knight d7 in reality, but we can kind of see a difference here that f4 is not going to be as effective when you don't have the option to take back with a knight. A position like this would certainly be a lot closer to equality by comparison. But returning to the game, yeah, he played the move of Queen c7, which I was pretty happy to see this move because now we get this familiar structure where we have a decent chance to take control of d5. Around this point, I was very much reminded of the very famous Smyslov Bondarevsky game from Bishop E2 Skaveningen. I probably should have played the move of King H1 and just got out of the way and made this nonsense on this diagonal, because King H1 is always going to be a useful move in such a position. Instead, I played Knight G3, which is probably a little bit too automatic here. It would be going too far to call it a mistake, but I think that if Black plays a move H5, which I have to admit is probably the sort of move that if I was playing with Black would probably be the first move I think of, but somehow I guess with my slightly egoist approach to the game that the idea just didn't occur to me from Black's point of view. Um, but yeah, H5 is kind of a good reason probably why you maybe don't want to rush with Knight G3 so fast. Then you might wait till you perhaps have a few more pieces out first. But okay, in the game he played Bishop E7, and again the timing of King H1 is probably not ideal, but it's not, again, not really a mistake either, I think. Sorry, I didn't play King H1 yet, but maybe it would have made more sense here. End up playing Bishop G5, just sort of looking for the right moment to kind of just liquidate and use the D5 square. But it's kind of hard to do this in reality, and also another reason why King H1 would have been good is that White Black does have the option to sort of grab a pawn here, and even though we are getting compensation with the bishop pair, it's definitely a situation where Black is not objectively in danger. Let's put it like this. So yeah, I mean, if there's two games like this one was a lower quality game by me, but unfortunately not considerably lower quality. He played the move of b5 again, probably a little bit of a mistake here, but my move at king h1 is also not really the best response in hindsight. I just think that b4 and just kind of liquidating the tension is just going to be fine for Black, because in a position like this, what you kind of see is that we kind of lose the d5 outpost, and even though we get the e4 outpost in return, they also are going to have some very real counterplay against the c pawn to kind of offset the e4 square. So it probably just ends up being an equal position, and it's maybe why I should have played a little bit differently in the game. I'm not going to say what I should have done though, because there is actually a little bit of a puzzle I want to set for those of you who have got to this far in the video. If you got this far, I'm going to assume that you're somewhat serious about maybe trying to play better chess. But I think that this position is kind of a useful one for trying to come up with the right plan for white. And I was quite proud of seeing this move in the game. So if you do need a bit more time to figure out the answer, you can always pause the video and come back when you've come to a decision. But really, the computer will tell you there's kind of a lot of good moves. Like it'll tell you that all of these moves are going to give white a small advantage. But I think that the most precise from a human point of view is definitely the move of knight to h5. Because by playing knight h5, you're just setting up that Smyslov Wondorowski situation where you're just going to trade off the minor pieces that are covering the d5 square, so that when you get to a position like this one, and of course I'm aware that yeah, black probably didn't play it in the best way. Like this is again just releasing attention a little prematurely. But if we do take this position, you can kind of see the parallel between Smyslov Bondarevsky with the good knight versus the bad bishop. We're having that extra space with the pawn on d5, which does give you very good attacking chances. Also realizing that, knight queen e4 does lose the exchange, and that if they were to take the other pawn, similar story with rook c1 and the knight just getting into to pick up a very large chunk of material. So in the game, my opponent played bishop f6, and I kind of sensed that maybe objectively the best move is just to play something like queen g4 and just kind of keep the control over the position. But I also felt okay, taking the material surely can't be bad either. It does at least clarify the position a little bit. I mean, I was a little surprised my opponent didn't take on e4 and go for a position like this one, which I mean, admittedly, is still clearly better for white with the extra material, but yeah, black having a 2-0 central majority does mean there are still some maybe very slim chances to still draw from a position like this one as black. But instead, yeah, he kind of just made it easy for me. I think once I get this sort of position, it really is just a matter of technique and, note A3 as well, just to kind of create those fresh weaknesses to attack. Because when there are multiple weaknesses, it just becomes much harder for the opponent to defend. Yeah, I mean, technically I could have even just taken the pawn, and probably that's what I should have done here. I mean, I didn't realize I was actually going to be winning a pawn if I played this sequence. Like I didn't see the move rook 8 d6 at the end. But fortunately, it's a position where even with missing this chance, it's still going to be, basically a position that black's not able to save because black just doesn't have any counterplay. I mean, maybe it's a little early for him to resign, but at the same time, we are going to be able to just kind of switch around between the weaknesses and, worst case, we'll kind of be able to rip it open with like b4, b5, or c5 later. So it will still be a win. It's just going to take a little bit of time. But yeah, those were the two games I played, and here you can see like it maybe wasn't a perfect game, but still like an average center pawn loss of 14 in game one and 18 in game two. I mean, even in a classical game, that's like still a grandmaster level of play. So I think we can be fairly happy with these games. And yeah, if you are enjoying these videos, do make sure to show your appreciation with a like to the video. If you're not already subscribed, I can also suggest that, not just to support me, but also so that you get the notifications for the videos in your feed, so you're not going to miss out on something that you will really enjoy and find quite valuable for improving your chess. But yeah, that's all for this one, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.